It's a Bleav in Texans podcast. I'm here with Matt Sims of the Sims Complete podcast with Matt and Phil on Bleav. And Matt, I was given the opportunity to talk to you today. Specifically, somebody said, hey, Lindsay, our friend, said, do you want to have Matt Sims on to talk about CJ Stroud? And I'm going to tell you how it's been in Houston here for the last couple of weeks during free agency. We've barely talked about CJ Stroud. We're so burnt out on everything from that Patriots game until through the couple of weeks after the Super Bowl that I actually got excited when she gave me that email because I felt like, yeah, you know what? I need to talk to somebody from outside of Houston about this CJ Stroud guy and exactly where he is. And where if I give you a blank slate, where are you right now on CJ Stroud headed into 2026?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there is no easy answer for this. I think that him, along with his counterpart in that same draft class, Bryce Young, are in that same field of we see potential. We know what they're capable of. We've seen some highs. We've seen some lows. We've seen some really low lows as well. And, you know, this is a big year for him coming up. It really is. And I think it's a big year really even for the coaching staff of D'Amico Ryans to kind of prove even to CJ Stroud that, yeah, we can build an offense around you to feel confident, right? To build momentum week after week and really to capitalize off of just the unbelievable rookie year that they have failed to kind of build off of in a positive way for a young quarterback. But we can see like what quarterbacks are capable of when they have that environment to build into and to have that continued success.
Yeah, and I guess that's where I would tell you locally, it's, you know, it's all over the place in terms of the fan base. People that are out on CJ completely, people that still believe in him.
Totally get it.
Yeah, there's always going to be that.
Yeah.
I think the hardest thing with quarterbacks is to figure out, all right, how do we separate the quarterback play from the offensive coordinator, from the offensive line? And then I think especially really these last 3 years, they've never had a consistent rushing attack.
Right.
And when we look at free agency this year so far, they've added a couple of offensive linemen to the mix now in Braden Smith and Wyatt Teller that are really good run blockers, you know, and they re-signed Ed Ingram. He's a really good run blocker, needs to develop in pass protection still. But like, how realistic is it to say, all right, at the very least, we got to see what CJ is when they have a credible rushing attack. They don't have to be the best rushing attack in the league, but it's hard to play quarterback when you don't have any kind of a competent rushing attack.
I think it's paramount, right, to the success of your football team, one, and then the success of your quarterback. And I totally agree with you, too. And even just when I look at the running back room as well, right, and I think, like, Woody Marks, what is he? What is David Montgomery? Those guys are bowling balls. Those are guys that, like, hey, throw them in there between the trenches, and they're just going to bounce off linebackers and D linemen and just push forward and get those 4 or 5 extra yards, those tough, gritty yards where even when the play isn't blocked well, they're still moving the pile forward. Then you got guys like Jawad Jordan. I'm kind of curious to see, like, are they going to start to utilize a little bit more of his skill set moving forward? A good versatile back out of Louisville that was just drafted a year ago that I think, you know, there's a place for him within this offense moving forward. So I think the development of the offensive line, the emphasis on the run game, the emphasis on being under center, getting CJ Stroud under center with those play action passes, allowing him to set up behind the line of scrimmage and to throw the football aggressively down the field. Those are all just marks that you want to do. And what are we doing now, right? What's the conversation going with, Seth, right? It's we're recreating the exact same success that we saw in Seattle. And again, it's a copycat league, but like they're the great example of that. There's no superstar, so to speak, right? When you look at their offense, yes, we can go to JSN. Of course, we talk about Sam Darnold and all that, and Kenneth Walker really hot there at the end. But throughout the season, there was always kind of like this natural flow to their offense where it wasn't necessarily on the one guy every single week. And they have to do a better job of that in Houston, of taking that pressure off of the one guy and making it more about the whole group together as a conglomerate of an offense moving forward. And I think that will really relieve a lot of the stress that maybe CJ Stroud may feel.
I'm glad you brought up Jawar Jordan because he had a couple nice moments midway through the season or towards the end of the season where he's the smaller guy, and he's a classic. You know how it is with running backs. You see him in training camp, out at practice when there's no contact and the size doesn't matter. He does some really impressive things.
Yeah.
During training camp, and we just haven't had an opportunity to see as much of it.
And I'm a Louisville Cardinal, so I know him, right? Like
yeah.
I went to Louisville and then unfortunately just smoked a little bit too much weed, and they're like, you got to get out of here, right? But like,
Yeah.
I always keep my eye on just Louisville, how they recruit, the people they go out, especially now with Jeff Braun being back there. Like, I know that he's always going to find those diamond in the rough type of football players. Jawad Jordan is a guy that, like, he absolutely needs to be a part of this offense moving forward because he is a little bit of that Swiss Army knife, like you're saying. He can catch the football well in the backfield. You can develop a screen game with him and add a little bit more burst and energy into your offense to go along with the two bruisers you have between the tackles.
What was that conversation like with your dad about the the smoking too much weed thing?
It's ongoing. It's ongoing. Yeah. No,
you had to keep him apprised of the different legislative changes. And
unfortunately, yeah, that's part of it too. And unfortunately for me, I mean, honestly, I would have been sponsored by one of these brands now. If I was in college football. But either way, that was my own fault. But still, like, I recognize his skill set and how it fits into the offense. And you got to think, like, with the group that they have, with Jaden Higgins, with Nico Collins, right, with the running backs that we just mentioned, like, there's enough pieces there for this skill group to be a very dangerous group. And it all just starts, again, with the big boys up front and how they establish that.
You know what I always I get frustrated sometimes because I think there's just so much emphasis on the passing game, as there should be. And, the run game isn't as important as it used to be. But I think almost
that's changing. That's changing.
That for one, that's changing.
It's going back again to like this old school mentality of like, 3 yards is pretty good. We're gonna keep taking this,
and especially as defenses have gotten lighter.
Yes,
it's been frustrating for me the last couple of years because you'll see, for a while there it seemed like, oh no, what are we going to do? The defense is playing cover 2. Yeah. And like the old caveman in me is like, you run the freaking ball versus cover 2.
That's right.
There's a lot of coordinators that don't necessarily know how to run the ball or engineer a run game. So I get excited about the emphasis on smash mouth football. And I think the Texans have an offensive line coach in Cole Popovich. Last year was his first year as the offensive line coach. And I think he did make some improvements. It took half the season for it to really show up.
Yeah.
But part of it too is that I think one thing I like about the offensive line this year that's going to look different is they're going to have more veterans out there from the beginning. And when you look at the sim blitzes and everything that's going on with what defenses are doing these days, it's one thing to have like a young stud rookie offensive lineman, but those guys, they see these unbalanced defensive fronts, they see these sim blitzes, and it's a lot to process. I mean, like from a quarterback perspective too, to try to figure out exactly how you're going to attack this defense or where the threats are and how you set the protection. That's one of the things I tell myself to try to, all right, keep this in check with CJ. Like, it's a different game these days than it was even really 10 years ago in terms of diagnosing the defense.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And I think that goes back to even just like Mike McDonald and like what made his defense special this year, their ability to line up there with 4 D linemen, 2 linebackers, and a Nick and Man warrior, a few other guys that kind of fit in that position, like a Drake Thomas, right? And just say, hey, we're going to play this style of football. You still can't run the ball on us, though, despite the fact that we are potentially light, right, in the box. And something that like my father has always preached to us, right, about football and just like about the structure of a football team and all that I think always just reigns true too, especially with this game, and it's a word that we throw around a lot, complementary. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Culture and complementary are like the 2 words that everybody throws around. But like, for the Houston Texans, their offense has to be complementary to what their defense does. Their defense is very simple. It's line up, here's the look, and it doesn't matter. We're still going to overpower you and be physical and punch you in the face. The offense needs to have a little bit of that same identity as well. They need to have the ability of like, we know that that we're running the football and we don't care. We're still going to run the football with David Montgomery and Woody Marks. And then, okay, hey, let's bring in another little gadget play here to mix it up, right? To confuse you, to throw you off the scent here and there. And like, this is what the great offenses do. This is why guys like Kyle Shanahan, even with a backup quarterback, still can be very successful as an offense, right? And cutting people up and going through the process of that. So that's where I feel like the Houston Texans, like, every now and then line up, let your offense just tee off on the defense, get after it. And yeah, the body blows might not mean much in the first and second quarter, but dang, in the third and fourth quarter, it is awesome to see defenses wilt as you kind of keep pounding the rock.
I like, what was your first year in the NFL? 2012?
That's a great question. Yeah, maybe. The other habits affect memory loss.
Yeah.
But like, I would say 2012, right? Yeah, it was like my first year. Yeah.
With the Jets. And okay. So my final year was in 2006. And it feels like with every step in the passing game, like in the NFL and where it's evolved, it's like there's a generation every 10 years in the way things are done. And I'm always intrigued by, sometimes I'll see Tom Brady talk about how young quarterbacks aren't as smart or as advanced as they used to be. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about when Tom Brady came into the league in the early 2000s, it was like, all right, I mean, you're facing
H2,
yeah,
X and Y hook.
The looks they were seeing on defense, you'd see some zone blitzes and stuff, but it really, the complexity on defense wasn't the same. And to be a young quarterback, seeing the stuff they're seeing now compared to even like 10 years ago or so when you were a young quarterback in the league, is it that much different from even 10 years ago?
It is. And I think it's morphed, right? It's evolved. I think there's a little bit more now, especially with football, where maybe the position names don't quite actually mean what they used to at one point. Now it's like a little bit like when we watch the combine and things of that nature, or guys like Nick Manwari and a few others that are coming out this year. It's like, I don't necessarily look at them as like, oh, he's an off the ball linebacker. It's like, no, he's a football player. He's got great speed. He's got great size. I can put him at DN if I need to. I can put him here in a nickel back situation. He could do a little of everything. So I think the game has morphed in that sense to where like we're not in a traditional compartmentalizational box, right? Always with how we divvy up our players. And then the other part of it too is like, for Tom Brady, sometimes I kind of laugh when he does kind of go on these rants as well too, because it's like, Tom, you're looking at this from the perspective of like, you were with the best coaching staff in the world that's ever been assembled, right? Multiple Super Bowl champions on that staff before your dynasty even took place. And you're looking at it as like, oh, these guys are unprepared. These guys are, it's like, yes, but you're also comparing your environment to an environment that no one else has ever experienced other than yourself.
Yeah.
And, he's a big part of it. There's no doubt about it. But just like,
that's why it's also you're Tom Brady. Like, you shouldn't be expecting.
To me, it's like,
you're one of the all-time greats. Yeah, they're not all going to look like you.
Yeah, no doubt. And like, listen, he wasn't that great when he came out of college.
Right.
So don't give me that, right? So like, let's be real about it. He wasn't even the starting quarterback at Michigan for the majority of his career.
Yeah, the second half of his career in the NFL, he operated a lot different than he did in the first half of his career. That point where he became to that next level, Nirvana level quarterback, it was a different. It took some time for him to get there.
Absolutely. And I would say that too, like a big part of it really was the 2017, right, Super Bowl against us in Atlanta, where it was like, once he won that Super Bowl, he really rode the coattails of that for the rest of his career. What happened though? What set that up? Hey, great structure around you, right? That's the biggest thing. And I think that's what people keep in mind. That's why I've been a little bit on a rant this offseason too about like quarterback play and quarterback payment as well. We got Kyler Murray and Tua Tagovailoa, guys that are getting paid top 5, in the NFL. And, look at their teams. Their teams are poorly structured. And because they're poorly structured and focused on just pleasing the quarterback, they didn't succeed. And now they're on the streets kind of looking for new homes or found new homes now. And, where Tom, best quarterback in the league, no doubt, right? When he was during that dynasty, he was paid middle of the pack, right? Within the NFL. So, even those things, I don't think Tom even really can understand the gravity of just how amazing impact for the whole structure was around him, because that's all he knew. It's kind of like a guy who's like 7th generation Princeton grad, right? Talking to somebody who just graduated the junior college down the street, being like, how do you not know this? And it's like, well, we come from a different environment, man. Like I haven't experienced that yet, but I'm working towards it. So that's sometimes like what I feel like when Tom talks about like football play and how some of us are idiots in that regard.
Well, and then the part of it too, where sometimes the guys that have had a lot of success or just have natural ability or what have you. Yeah. It's like when they try to coach it, they don't realize how many steps ahead they're skipping. And I remember, Kevin Biggio, who's the son of Craig Biggio here, he would joke about when his dad would coach him that, it was a lot of like, I don't know, you just hit it.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
And he'd be like, I'm not dad. I'm not the same guy as you. Did you have to deal with that with Phil at all? Were there times where you're like, all right, listen, maybe I don't have the same natural ability as you, Dad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting because my father really does go through this. We've had this conversation a few different times, and I really, every time we have a similar like conversation, I take something different away from it. So it's funny that we've had this conversation maybe like a dozen times, let's say.
Yeah.
But every time there's like, oh yeah, I didn't really think about it from this perspective. And he was saying that in his generation, of course, on offensive play, especially with the New York Giants, they were labeled as a running team, right? But oddly enough, like they were a team though too that like Big Phil was throwing for more yards than Dan Marino at portions of his career, right? But just because they were labeled that way, no one really kind of saw them that way, right? Because of their coaching staff and the way their coaches looked at their team, right? So I think even that aspect is really interesting. And like my father always mentions just the fact, he's like, if I would have known, what I was teaching quarterbacks now when I played, he goes, damn, I would have won maybe 5 more Super Bowls, So like, this better than anybody, right? Anybody who's been a part of it knows, like, you kind of have a little bit of these epiphanies, like after it's been done, right?
Yeah,
like football players really figure out the game, like at the end of their career. You do have the few examples of guys like Kuechly and others, right, who are just like savants at it. But a lot of
it is. It's like when you're like with defensive linemen, especially, it's like you get to year 8, 9, 10. You're like, oh, I know what play's coming. I know exactly.
Absolutely.
It's like you're seeing it in slow motion, but that's also is like, oh, I know what play's coming, but I just tore my ACL.
D-line is the perfect example of it because we're going to see a tremendous amount of defensive linemen get drafted here in the first rounds here of this upcoming draft. They're going to struggle because they've never seen play structure like this ever, right? And it's like, whoa, I didn't even know that the tackle could do this and this look and all that stuff, right? Because there's just not that experience to it. I even think back to who was it? I want to say maybe the Los Angeles Rams. They ran a play against the Seattle Seahawks, and they targeted Nick Manwari on the play. It was like a man beater where they run the back out of the backfield, right, with that whole fence kind of look. And I remember watching the play and being like, Nick Manwari's never seen this play before. That's why he couldn't defend it, And like this was a one where like that's going to go in the memory bank forever. And now he's going to know when he has bunch to his side with a back offset to the opposite side, be ready for the back to that same side to come across and to use him as a pick. So examples like that are wild.
Well, that's where like with Kalen Bullock with the Texans, he's played really well and he's advanced a lot. And I'm always careful when I present it, on local radio, because I don't want to make it seem like I'm saying something negative about Kalen Bullock, but that position, especially, it's neck up, and there's so many things that Kalen Bullock just hasn't seen yet and doesn't know. And there's still times in games where you realize, okay, yep, all right, that's in the memory bank, and next year it's going to be a different version.
Great example of it.
Some of the CJ Stroud stuff that we kind of took a hiatus from that I'm curious to get your opinion on. Because I hate talking about body language. Like I generally I feel, it's, with quarterbacks especially, because look, Eli Manning had horrible body language until he won a Super Bowl, and then all of a sudden, oh yeah, that's just him. That's just him, not succumbing to the pressure and everything.
Right.
But it was a big topic after the playoffs with CJ, and I think partly because they mentioned it on the broadcast a couple times. Where are you with that with CJ and just watching from just say even the TV copy? Like, what do you read into any of that?
I do. I think one of my favorite things about being a former quarterback and being on those sidelines and seeing people's reactions and things, and also too, I love guys like Matt Ryan, right, and Matt Schaub to just like a whole nother degree because they were
because Schaub was there with you in 2019 in Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, like those two guys together, right, in a room. I mean, I thought I was smart with football, then I was hanging out with them, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm an idiot. Like these guys, but like. And listen, that was kind of like the role that I played within that locker room as well. And in that quarterback room, that I was the jester. I was going to keep it light. I was going to make sure that when Kyle and Matt and Matt Ryan and Matt Schaub all butted heads, I was like, hey guys, you're all full of it, So, but like when I think about CJ Stroud's body language in particular, one, that's where it's like, D'Amico Ryans, did you see CJ Stroud's body language? Like that's where I kind of put a little bit more on the coaching staff of like, you clearly knew that this player was not in a position to be confident, to feel like he was in a position of power and to be comfortable. And, I said this even like the night of the game, the day after it, just like they should have taken CJ Stroud out of that football game. They should have played Davis Mills. They should have taken their chances with their backup quarterback and settled the waters, because at that time they still had a lead despite being outplayed. And I do Bleav that they would have won that game, but potentially would have won the following games as well with just a little bit more of a steady approach at the position.
You know what?
So,
it is really interesting hearing it from a quarterback, especially because, I can't remember who it was. It was a former quarterback that we talked to during the Super Bowl, who said the same thing. And I think I've heard it from a few different former quarterbacks now, where I 100% listen to it when it's a quarterback talking about it, because you guys know how important that part of it is.
We know how important it is, and we also know how scary it is too, because like it could have gone another degree worse for CJ, to where it was like, okay, you're now potentially going to ruin his career and his confidence forever.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where I got like a little concerned when I was watching the game live. Sorry to cut you off.
No. That's all right. Because I think the sum total of it too is that CJ didn't look good in the Steelers game. He did some nice things, but he also looked flustered at times, and he was making decisions that he wouldn't normally make. I'm thinking back to when Brian Hoyer was benched in the first game of the season one year versus the Texans. And I talked to somebody from the Texans about it afterwards, and what wasn't reported at the time was just basically that, like, no, you had to have seen Brian Hoyer in that moment and see for whatever reason why things weren't operating and it wasn't going to work that day.
Yeah.
And I tried to, man, at halftime of that game, I was trying to make the decision myself so I could speak about it with transparency afterwards. And I kept asking myself, would I have the guts to bench him in this moment?
Yeah.
And I don't think I would have, but I'm also not a head football coach,
Right.
But yeah, in hindsight, I think that it probably would have been, given that there was no miraculous comeback.
Yeah. There's a lot to it. And even like, that's where I even like was having kind of like a laugh on the couch watching the game and hearing the guys at ESPN breaking it down and just be like, hey, this is CJ Stroud's future. And I'm like, listen, this has nothing to do with CJ Stroud. This is a team game, and CJ's a part of the team. And yes, it's going to hurt, no doubt. It really is. But what's going to hurt is the fact that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, that Houston Texans team may look back at that moment and be like, you know what? We did not give ourselves the best opportunity to win the football game, right?
Yeah.
And there are times where, unfortunately, yes, someone does have to bear the brunt, right, of what is going on and still be a part of the bigger picture of what you're trying to do. And I'm a guy that, like, I Bleav in CJ Stroud. I know that he's a talented football player. I know that he's capable of tremendous things and being a top quarterback in league. I also know that the Houston Texans are the ones that are failing him in accomplishing that goal, right? But at the same time, when you are in that position, you do have to make those difficult decisions, a la a Nick Saban from Hurts to Tua type of move to win the football game.
Yeah. Boy, that's a whole nother podcast talking about how that's played out over time.
Right.
Yeah.
And we had no idea that would play out the way that it did. But Jalen Hurts, no doubt, became a better player, better person, better leader because of that moment in his life.
I think in one of your Sims Complete podcasts at some point, I can't remember. I didn't end up watching it, but one of the titles was something along the lines of are the coaches failing CJ Stroud, if I remember correctly. Yeah. As you watched the Texans this year and you watched that offense attempt to evolve, what did you feel where perhaps they were underserving him?
Well, so again, now this is where I'll kind of talk a little bit out of both sides of my mouth here.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about the offense and how I said it needs to match the defense, right? What I think the offense needs to improve upon is the fact of, like, yes, you want your offense to match your defensive style. But at the same time, for offense, and especially offense in the NFL, you can't just always line up in this stagnant formation and run the same basic group of plays over and over again and think that you're going to have success, right? We all know that at that point, right? At that point, it's like, listen, we can all make the adjustment on Madden and say, like, hey, these are the group of plays. This is what we're going to do to defend it. There has to be a certain level of just mixture of formations, and then with the same concepts attached to them to allow brevity, right? For the decision making, for knowing that number one is going to be wide open, because we are going to formation it in a way that allows this corner to play soft and off, and we're going to hit that flat every single time. You know, these are things that I think that they need to improve upon to bake into their offense a little bit more. And also, too, to empower the quarterback, right, to take a little bit more control and ownership at the line of scrimmage, right? Now, this is definitely true to what Tom was saying earlier. I do feel like at times it's like, I'm not sure if CJ Stroud's running the offense, right, or if he's just running the play.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And
If he's not, if he's
difference.
taking advantage of all the tweaks that he can or should be making.
And that's where, like, they should empower him that way. There should be periods in practice where it's just like, hey, we're going to run 12 plays. CJ, get to the line of scrimmage and call your 12 plays just to start working that muscle at the line of scrimmage. It's just saying, hey, this is the defense I'm seeing. You know what? I'm going to run inside zone to the right because it is cover 2, and I'm just going to take the 3 to 4 yards here.
Oh, that was you know, in the beginning of the season, because we were wondering beforehand, because Nick Caley had been in both New England and with the Rams. We were curious about what's it going to look like, more like a quintessential Rams defense or New England or Rams offense or New England offense.
Right.
You know, it looked more and more like, okay, there's a lot of New England elements to this offense. But I went back and I did a video where I showed just some of Tom Brady's command at the line of scrimmage. And there was just like one play, and I didn't have to wait long, you know, where, okay, he sees what look they're showing pre-snap, calls a dummy count, sees the safety starting to back out or starting to walk up, calls in Gronkowski for extra protection, nods to the outside receiver who ends up running a slant, and it's just boom. And it looks like the easiest throw in the world, but it's Tom Brady dialed that out completely.
Right.
I guess with CJ, it's all right. How long does it take you to get to that level of operating and being able to see everything pre-snap? And then the one thing too this year was there were times where, man, all right, versus the blitz especially, I'm trying to look and see what CJ's seeing, and he doesn't have any eyeballs on him from any of the receivers. So how much of it is that the receivers aren't sight adjusting to things? And that goes to what you're talking about with the entire operation. I don't know. Like, I don't know how much is Caley, like, should he have them more advanced at this point? Or are they in the 101 level of functioning right now? Or are they at the 201 level of functioning? I don't know.
I think a great example of what we're discussing right now is what we saw with Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing week 1 of the Bears this year and being like, this is great. Caleb Williams has never actually played quarterback before, right? This is what I said in my mind as I'm watching the game. And it's not to say that he's played quarterback, because that's another thing too that a lot of people throw around, like, oh, I'm a quarterback. It's like, okay, but what does a quarterback actually do? It's like, oh, and it's like, no, you don't understand. It's the stuff off the field. It's the stuff within the locker room. It's the stuff right in that meeting room. It's the leadership qualities. It's about the attention to detail. It's about solving each and every challenge as it comes up, remembering how we solve those challenges, how we mixed up those looks to create that stuff. And I just don't know if they're pushing CJ Stroud to that extent yet. Now, when Ben Johnson and Caleb, I could see it in Caleb's eyes. I was like, he has never worked so hard mentally in his life to be a starting quarterback. And now, listen, September, yes, it was a little rough on him. October, okay, you could start to see it was starting to kind of like settle in, right? Okay, then the months go, and you're like, this guy is really growing up right before your eyes. He's becoming a man. He's becoming a quarterback in the NFL. What it takes, the mental strain and stamina every single down to be locked in, to have the answers. And even when you don't have the answers, to still be resilient enough to kind of get through it and to move on to the next play and to survive. And I think the Texans took a little bit of the approach of like, we're not going to overwhelm him. We're going to give him just enough of what he needs, right? But just enough of what he needs is still not enough, right, to accomplish the ultimate goal of like winning the Super Bowl, right? And that's where I think they're kind of falling short. Like, I understand they're not trying to push him to make him uncomfortable or to overwhelm him, but it is that uncomfortable part of change that ultimately allows you to change and to get better.
Texans are at 9.5 wins on FanDuel right now, which is where they've started off pretty much every year. The defense always makes me feel confident in going on the over on that. The fact that you were in the same room as Matt Schaub in 2019 is really interesting to me because, man, there were a lot of people this year, and I'm one of them, that kind of wished, wow, if Case Keenum were back here again, like he was in CJ's rookie year, it might be really nice to have that veteran quarterback in the room. And what was your experience in Atlanta having? And I know it was a weird dynamic because Matt Schaub was in the room because he knew the offense really well, but it was with Matt Ryan, who's an old veteran quarterback. Was Schaub more of a resource for Matt Ryan or for everybody else, like the receivers and everybody?
Absolutely, everybody else, and even for Kyle Shanahan as well too. I think that's the power of someone like a Matt Schaub, right, in a locker room that way. Is, one, he's a pro, right? He's a guy that's an all-pro football player himself. He's a guy that's a Pro Bowler and has played in big-time games and all that. And I think he just really understood the challenges that Matt Ryan was facing and learning this Kyle Shanahan offense and adapting to it because it was different than the Dirk Cutter worlds that he had come from before that. And really him just being a great sounding board. And just another, just like a confirmation as well, really for Matt Ryan and for the others of the like, I'm not sure if I really like this. And he's like, yep, I agree. I don't know if this makes sense for us, So it's like, I think he did a great job of just being, that great mediator, right, in the meeting and just being able to say, hey, this is good. This is not good. Hey, Matt, how do you feel about this? Are we confident here? Hey, Matt LaFleur, like we should do this instead of, running our play like that. And that's ultimately what you want in a quarterback room. You just want to have these open conversations that way to where everyone feels comfortable to say what they're thinking and feeling, and then to go through the process of like, what is actually important? Are we just doing this to make ourselves feel better? How can we do this better to win the football game? And that goes from play design, opponent, our own team, personnel, coaches that we're managing, the opposing coaches that we're managing against. And he's a guy that just had tremendous resources at his disposal.
I think the last one I'll hit you with, it's going to be out of nowhere. And the Texans right now on FanDuel are the 12th favorite to win the Super Bowl. I don't know where the Browns are, but they're much lower than that. Just I'm going to give you the floor, and I am genuinely listening here. I have not watched enough of Shedeur Sanders.
Okay,
Shedeur Sanders, does he start this year? And if he does start, what are you thinking about him right now?
I think for Shedeur Sanders and for Dillon Gabriel, I actually think Dillon Gabriel showed some more moments on film of like just being more like structured NFL quarterback play. No doubt Shedeur, with the excitement of him coming into the starting lineup and kind of getting in there, getting the win and all that and making some big plays, that was exciting. But it's a little bit of like the carelessness with the football was wild at times. The lack of energy as well. That goes back to like the body language thing too. Like when you're in the NFL and, hey, if you're a first rounder, I get it. Like everything's going to kind of work through you, right? Outside of that, though, you have to make sure everything is working for you, right? And being actually like very active and making sure that you're a part of this process. And I think, for the Browns guys moving forward, for all the quarterbacks going forward, you got a new start. Todd Monken, veteran coach, has been through it all. He's seen it all, right? He's going to be able to sift through all of that BS real quick, right? And now it's all about just like, what do you do well? What are your weaknesses? Being honest about that, maximizing the things that you do well within this new look offense, limiting the weaknesses, and really showing some improvement step by step of saying that you can get better. And a lot of that might not even have to do with on the field, but necessarily just interactions with the media, right? Interactions with our teammates, the development of a whole culture beyond that, So I think those are really big things for the Browns quarterback room moving forward for both Dillon Gabriel and for Shedeur Sanders.
Matt Sims, you can catch him on with Phil, his father, on Sims Complete on Bleav. Matt, really appreciate it. This is awesome stuff. I can't wait to have you on at some point, hopefully after a few Texans wins, and we'll reassess where CJ is.
Hey, listen, I think it's going to be a great year for the Houston Texans. I'm excited for CJ Stroud. I know it didn't end the way that he wanted to last year and all that. And I commend him too for his bravery of still going out there and competing. There's no doubt about it. And for Nick Caley and the rest of the boys, let's go. Got a great running back room, got a good offensive line now to build off of it. Let's see what happens in the draft too. I'm sure they're going to add another stud guy in the secondary moving forward again. But really, really optimistic that the Texans are going to have a great season again.
All right. It's the Bleav in Texans podcast, sponsored by FanDuel. Thank you, Matt.